You know, Labour is done when they're being praised by Tommy Robinson. So I'm sure you've heard, the new asylum policies announced by the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and how unbelievably grotesque they are. After days of briefing, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has released a 33-page document outlining policies she hopes will curb bogus asylum claims and cuts the number of people attempting to travel across the channel in small boats. Entitled Restoring Order and Control, it aims to reduce arrivals and increase removals. The government will axe a legal requirement to provide support to asylum seekers who would otherwise be destitute. So basically, they're going to put them in poverty. Now look, a whole host of government support will be removed to those who are seeking asylum, but it was this policy that has raised eyebrows. Jewellery and valuables belonging to refugees could be confiscated in order to pay for accommodation and other costs as part of sweeping reforms to the asylum system, a Home Office minister has said. Jewellery, I mean, imagine coming across from a country that's been bombed to bits and we seize jewellery, which, to be honest, might not even be worth that much, but probably means a hell of a lot to the person who's fleeing war, and then we're just going to take it. Now, this kind of policy has been done before, and seemingly it's comparable to what the Nazis did. Now, people saying, stop comparing everything to the Nazis, it's hyperbolic, and I get that, people do that, right? People do that. But if you also don't want the comparisons, then maybe don't implement policies that were literally used back then. And it's that cruel that even Tommy Robinson is happy. The Overton window has been obliterated. Well done, patriots. So that's the famous Trump, Musk, Zionist supporting patriot. But he's kind of right there. I mean, the Overton window has shifted because Labour allowed it to move that way. Now, in PMQ's, Shabana Mahmood shut down the Lib Dems after they accused her of stoking division.
I have to say to the honourable gentleman, I wish I had the privilege of walking around this country and not seeing the division that the issue of migration and asylum system is creating across this country. Unlike him, unfortunately, I am the one that is regularly called a fucking packy and told to go back home. It is I who knows through my personal experience and that of my constituents just how divisive the issue of asylum has become in our country. And I do say to him, I wish it were possible to say that there isn't a problem here, that there's nothing to see and that it is all, in fact, just extremist, right-wing talking points. But this system is broken and it is incumbent on all members of Parliament to acknowledge how badly broken the system is and to make it a moral mission to fix this system so that it stops creating the division that we all see.
Now, I thought that was grotesque. As you can see, I'm brown. And I've had the exact same thing said to me. And if you go on Twitter, I still get it. But to use her experience of racism to justify being cruel to asylum seekers is so fucked up. I mean, the way it looks, Mahmood is saying, I've had racism in my life, so now I'm going to appease these people by being cruel to asylum seekers. And also using racism to shut down debate. I absolutely despise that. I mean, she didn't come back on the Lib Dem by saying, well, these are the reasons I'm doing it. These are the reasons why it's good. She just went, well, I've had racism. And then she said something which is shocking. And you can't come back from that, right? Because if someone says, well, I got called this, how dare you try and downplay my racism? I mean, I thought we left liberal identity politics behind. I guess not for Labour. I mean, I hate this politics. It's the merit of the argument that's the most important thing. You know, I'm a brown person. If a white person said to me, you're wrong, I'm not going to be like, well, you're a white person. You don't get to say I'm wrong as a brown person. No, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And if a white guy's right, he's right. And, you know, the Lib Dem that said this is stoking division, he's absolutely right. And Mahmood using racism that she faced in her life as an excuse to shut down debate and then also push really disgusting asylum policy is absolutely insane. And this is the thing, it's not going to work. When you accept framing from the right, they've already won. So how is this working out for the Labour Party? Have they increased their political capital? No. The Greens have now reached 17% on YouGov, which is a reputable poll, and that's the highest they've got with that pollster. Labour are going to lose more votes to the Greens. And they're trying to win reform votes, but it's not going to work. You're going to people and saying, please vote for us. I'm going to implement the policies of the party that you support. Will you now join us? They'll say, no, we hate you. Or they'll say, we don't believe you. So why are you chasing these voters? It makes zero sense. But the votes to the left, right, they're the ones they're losing to the Green Party. I mean, this is obviously like big brain centrist politics. What they think is they look at national polling on individual policies. And they say, look, if we just had a political party that represents these individual policies that's popular, you'll win. But that's not how it works. I mean, you hear it from blue Labour types. They say the country is economically left-wing, but they're not that socially progressive. If only the Labour Party were to be more hardline in immigration and asylum seekers, but they're economically left-wing, they'd be in power forever. But again, that's not how it works. One, because blue Labour don't even support like left-wing economic policy. Otherwise, they would have at least praised Jeremy Corbyn on his leftward drift in terms of the economy. They didn't. And two, that's not how the electorate works. That's not how the political system works. The way to win an election is you have to appeal to your base and then broaden out. So you do have to compromise, of course. You do have to win swing voters, but you also need your base. What Labour are doing is abandoning their base and going towards voters that absolutely despise them. And even if you could say, well, they're meeting where the public are at when it comes to immigration and asylum seekers, that doesn't matter because the votes that you need, i.e. Greens and Lib Dems, in order for you to win, won't vote for you. No political party wins the majority support. When was the last election that got over 50%? When was the last election of a party that represented every person's views? It doesn't do that. People will vote for parties and they'll go, right, I disagree on all these things, but I like their policy on this, and I thought they were charismatic and they were effective and they were good at arguing. Like, it's a narrative war, not a policy war. But what they are doing is emboldening Reform's narrative. They're literally saying to you, Reform are absolutely right on everything, but vote for us instead of voting for Reform. It again reminds me of the Ed Miliband Labour leadership, where he was like, we're going to implement austerity, just not as bad as the Conservatives. But what they did was say austerity is legitimate, and then people went, okay, well, we're going to vote for the real austerity party rather than the Labour Party. It was about trust, and it didn't win. And then when Jeremy Corbyn made it an anti-austerity party, within 2 years, they won 40% of the vote. Much better than Ed Miliband. Look, the point isn't to ignore refugee crisis or immigration, right? But the point is to set the narrative. Now, Reform's sort of strongest suit, their story or their playbook, is immigration and asylum seekers, mostly immigration. And when the political conversation is framed around immigration, Reform are going to win. They are going to win because they're the ones that set the narrative. Even if Labour become out more right-wing than Reform, people are going to go, well, the Labour Party is just copying Reform. I still trust Reform. People at the end of the day have their trust in Reform when it comes to immigration. Right? People are not logical as well. They vote emotionally. So if they've got an emotional attachment to Reform on immigration, there's nothing Labour can do to convince you to vote on that. What Labour can do, though, is set the narrative on something else. So what's their bread and butter? What's their own lawn? Usually it's the NHS, it's inequality, it's taxes, it's workers' rights. These are the things where the Labour Party have historically been strongest. And had they stuck to that, okay, don't ignore immigration. They can still say we're going to have, controls on immigration, we're going to have a sensible immigration policy, but frame everything around inequality. That's where they usually win. Everybody knows that between the Conservatives, Labour and Reform, people probably think, okay, Labour are the more fairer party. Okay, it's ambivalent, but that's what people would say. So you stick to your strong suit. But what Shabana Mahmood and the Labour Party doing is performative cruelty. I mean, think about it. When you have everyday conversations with friends and family, you absolutely hear about immigration. But when was the last time you heard someone say, do you know what, I really wish they would seize assets from asylum seekers? When does that happen? It doesn't. So look, I think it's completely understandable that Labour want to control immigration because that's where the public is at. I get that, right? I don't know how you can be a social democratic party winning an election without saying we need to have some kind of a control on immigration. But when it comes to asylum policy, given that refugees and asylum seekers really make no difference, right, in terms of number, then why are you going after them? Unless you are just being cruel. And like I said, it's performative cruelty. And it's very simple. Look, I think the line should be, there is a small boat crisis and refugees are a problem, but not the problem in which the right wing are framing it. The problem is that we have an unstable world. We are participating in many bombing campaigns. We're supporting the US in trying to topple elected governments. We are funding a genocide. Maybe if we tried to create a world where refugees didn't exist in the first place, then we can do something about it. Go for the root causes. Then we're going to open up safe and legal routes. So anyone coming here is here legally. Although, look, obviously the leftist position is no one's illegal, but again, you can't really say that in the public realm if you want to win votes. So the line they can say is make sure we have the proper routes, right? Just do that. Then say, yes, we're going to bring down immigration, but we're going to do it fairly, right? They don't have to go into like absolute detail because again, when you're explaining you're losing, just reframe everything back to where they're popular at. They can do that. I don't have a problem with Labour saying they need to have control of immigration, right? Now, for me, my personal politics is I don't think immigration is a problem, but I'm in the minority. I accept that people don't believe that. So Labour can do that, but Labour going after asylum seekers and talking about taking their jewellery is sick. It's absolutely sick, and no one called for it. They're just trying to make themselves look tough, but they gain no political capital doing so. Labour still cannot grapple with the great issues of our time, and they're giving more and more credit to the right and the far right. At the end of the day, policies are what matter. So what difference does it make if Reform or Labour are implementing the same policy?